on, everybody? Rick back here with the Pilsners and Prelims podcast. Second go round. First one was UFC 294. 5.
Yep.
294. 294. Right. 294
next one.
Coming up with formerly John Jones until his partner Dontel Mays decided to tear his pec while they were training. So we'll see Dontel Mays on somehow the third fight of this main card. But we've got a pretty good fight night coming up for you in Brazil. A bunch of good prospects, some good veterans making their way back, and Elizeu, Zaleski, and some others. So it should be a good time. And we're bringing you 13 fights, really 12 with Esteban Ribovitz announcing that he's not going to be able to fight. Maybe 11. Who knows if Derek Lewis is going to be able to make it down there. He will definitely make it down there in time if he's traveling, because he was caught and arrested the other night going 86 miles per hour over the speed limit, going 136 in a 50 mile per hour zone. So not like he was on the highway. He was on your everyday road going 136. So no clue where his head's at. We'll talk about that later, as well as the other 25 fighters on the card. I'm excited to get into it. Andy, you've been here the entire way. How's it going? How we doing? You ready?
I'm good, man. Very excited for this card. I think it is a underrated fight night. In the sense that we're getting some exciting guys on one side of the card, but you may not know who the guy on the other side of the card is for some of these. So the main card should be a fun one too. We got both the Bonfim brothers back at it. We got Fakhretdinov coming in, I believe, towards the end of the prelims, and that'll also be really fun to see him go at it again. I think I got a lot of high hopes for him in the UFC. But yeah, man, I'm super excited to jump right into this one if you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. And for the first fight of the night, kicking it off in Sao Paulo, we've got Kaue Fernandes making his UFC debut at 8-1 record, going up against Marc Diakiese. Now with his 15th fight in the UFC, he's been in here for a while. 7-7 in the UFC, 16-7 overall. So came in undefeated. Came in with a lot of hype, especially early in his career, but it sort of petered out, going 2-4 over his last 6. But really, it's been a tale of who he's fought. I mean, he's 2-4 in his last 6, but I mean, over the course of his career, his losses come to Rafael Fiziev, Dan Hooker, Jakar Close, Nasrat Haqparast. So he's got a bunch of really good losses on his record, which isn't really a flex or anything to really write home about a guy, but he came in with a big kickboxing background and came in with the nickname Bone Crusher. He still holds it now. He's not as much of a bone crusher anymore, but he really came in with a very aggressive style, and he's worked on his wrestling game a lot since his time in the UFC, and you'll see that used in this fight more than likely, but it's taken away from some of those other elements. So he's had a bit of an issue finding what works well for him. And he's facing a guy in Fernandes who's going to throw everything at you as much as he can for as long as he can last. And so we've got an interesting fight where a more tentative veteran Diakiese is fighting Fernandes, who comes in. And it'll be interesting to see just how long Fernandes can last, and if Diakiese can get to another decision and just outlast Fernandes. But Andy, what do you have on this fight?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting where Fernandes seems to be the new toy for this weight division that's going to be similar to Marc Diakiese, where he's got that Muay Thai striker background. He's also got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which I find to be pretty fascinating, that he's going to be able to combine both of those and really put a couple of different looks towards Marc Diakiese, which should be a fun thing to watch. I think Diakiese has started to improve his wrestling a bit. His striking has really been his specialty for a long time, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it as special as it once was, right? I think that we've seen him start to fall off, as you said, 2-4 in the last 6. He also was previously a heavier favorite, like anywhere from -200 to -190, dipped down to around -150 last night. And then he is now back up to around -175 in some spots. The best spot you can get him right now is -139 on Bet Rivers. But a lot of these places now have him up to -145, -160. So people are starting to go back onto the Diakiese train as far as betting goes. I don't think that he really likes getting hit, even though he's only 30. Like, he has a lot of tread on the tires. I think that with that, Fernandes is going to be able to hit him, and he should be able to put some damage on him in the first round. I think what really concerns me is the gas tank of Fernandes, where if he doesn't make it past, or excuse me, if he makes it past the first round and a half, he could really see Diakiese, who is more of a seasoned vet, outlast him, even though Diakiese may not have that knockout ability that we would want to see from like someone in this opening fight. Are you worried at all about the gas tank for the newcomer here?
No. Okay. Yes, I am. I think that it might not come into action unless he can't get the finish. I think that coming in on short notice that we could, like, his gas tank already wasn't good. I think he's going to sell out for a finish. And if he doesn't get the finish, then, like you said, as the fight goes on, second, third round, Diakiese, and I butchered his name multiple. I've said it different every single time now. Apologies to Marc, but I think that we'll end up seeing a finish. I think that I'll just say Marc. I think that Marc has gone to a lot of decisions due to his passive style, and Fernandes is going to force it out of him. And now on this 2-4 streak, trying to keep his place in the UFC at 7-7, I think that we're going to end up seeing a finish either early by Fernandes or late by Diakiese. And that fight not to go the distance at plus 105 is a good bet for me. That's the bet that I'm going to take on this. And I lean Diakiese. The experience, I think, is a lot for me at minus 175. I wouldn't bet it ever at minus 175, but I lean him to win the fight.
Yeah, so I'm actually going the other way. I think that there's going to be a lot of hype. You also have the home crowd. And even though not everyone's going to be filtered into the arena yet, Fernandes will still have that home backing being in Brazil. That crowd is going to be absolutely rabid. They always are. They always put on a really good show down there, which is awesome, whether it's Sao Paulo, Rio, wherever they take them in Brazil. I think, too, that it's going to be a lot for Diakiese to handle, where that first round is going to be the true test, right? If he really pieces him up, maybe even if he does tire out a tad, he still is able to put enough on in the first round, 7.5 minutes, that then he is able to able to like just finish the deal and get it, whether it's by finish or do enough damage in the first 2 rounds that he can win enough and win the fight by decision. So I'm going to go with Fernandes money line plus 145 for a unit on DraftKings. Rick is going with Diakiese as his pick, but not as his bet. He is going with fight not to go the distance at, you said minus 105?
Plus 105, plus money.
Plus 105. So 2 plus money picks here. We will be right back as we head into Eduardo Moura versus Montserrat Conejo Ruiz. And next up, we have Eduardo Moura taking on Montserrat Conejo Ruiz coming out of Mexico. Eduardo Moura, she's getting her UFC debut here, but her last fight was on Dana White Contender Series where she did really well. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. She had some good showing in that fight. But Rick, I don't know if you had the same trouble as I did. It is virtually impossible to find any tape on Moura here. It's insane. It just seems like maybe this is just like bad timing or something, or like the promotions are so small. But it just seems like the only people who have tape on her are hopefully Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, who are making the matches, and especially make the matches for Dana White Contender Series, because they're bringing in somebody to show Dana, and there's no tape. I don't know what's going to happen there, but it worked out for them, right? She did really well in her Dana White Contender Series fight, and then now she gets to take on Montserrat here, and she's a multiple-time Mexican wrestling champ. She lost to Amanda Lemos in 2021, and she took 2 years off before getting 10-8'd in the first 2 rounds of her fight against Armen, and then beaten via ground and pound in the 3rd round. Now, wrestling is her forte here, and for me, I think that's going to be really entertaining to see go up against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What do you see on this fight? Or rather, what do you not see? Because it was impossible to find anything tape-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see much of anything on Eduardo Moura. I mean, we know what we've heard, which isn't much. It's that, I mean, the difference in this fight to me is stylistically, I mean, she's 6 inches taller, and Ruiz is a pretty good wrestler, but that's about it. She's not great in submissions on the ground. She's got 3 to her name over her 10 wins, but 2 knockouts as well and 5 decisions. But really, she's at a 6-inch disadvantage, and she likes to go with head and arm tosses. So I doubt she's going to be able to get up there. Moura, for as little tape as there is, It doesn't get any better when you look at her opponents' records. 6 of her 9 opponents have had 3 fights or less, 2 of which were debut fights. And then, I mean, you have some first round within a minute finishes, which doesn't tell me necessarily that you're like a dominant fighter. It tells me that you're probably just levels above really garbage regional competition in Brazil. So it's really hard to judge this fight. Moura opened up to jump towards odds. She opened up as a minus 400 favorite and is all the way up to minus 600 now. I mean, from what I've heard, from the little I've seen of Moura, I can see where it makes sense, but there's no shot that I'm going to believe in that against a UFC fighter that has shown some potential to at least impose her will on some fighters. So she's got toughness. Sometimes you don't like to know that. She's got some good submission defense. Maybe she can exhaust Moura, who really hasn't been deep into fights other than one split decision to a 12-14 fighter. I'm not wowed. I'm going to sprinkle. I'm only going to put a quarter unit, but I'm putting on Ruiz plus 425. Don't put any real money on this. If your units are like 50 grand, like don't put 12,500 on this, please. It's a gross fight.
Yes, I'm coming at this at the same exact angle too, where I know that the last fight was awful. She got absolutely destroyed. I know that she lost in her fight before that and then before taking 2 years off. However, where I want to give her a little bit of credit, her first fight in the UFC, she came in and beat Cheyenne Buys on 1 week notice after Kay Hansen had to drop. So I think crazier things have happened here, where maybe we see this as a case of like bad timing or like life came into play and there was something going on for her where that's why she got obliterated so bad in that fight. When the odds are this like lopsided like this, that's what I start to think of is like, where can you find an angle for this? And I think there are a few angles here where there's just not enough of a resume for Moura. There is a lot more of a resume from a wrestling standpoint for Montserrat. And that's where I want to take advantage of the odds here. And honestly, if they keep moving, like while you guys are watching this and hearing this, maybe just sit and wait. Take it tomorrow or take it like in a few hours. Just monitor those odds and see if you can get better. Because when I was doing my research the last couple of days, it was like, to Rick's point, plus 300, now plus 400. Now it's plus 430 on her money line at Caesars right now. I'm going to do a little bit more than Rick, than the quarter unit. I am going to go half unit on this just because I want that bigger payday for what could be, in my opinion, a lot closer odds. I think that the height disadvantage is definitely apparent, but when the odds are this lopsided, I'd love to be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. Coming up next, we have got Angela Hill taking on Denise Gomes. Tune in.
Coming up for the third fight of the night, we've got Angela Hill in her 24th UFC fight facing D. Gomes. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Could not find the pronunciation online. But we've got Angela Hill 10-13 in her 23 current UFC fights. No submissions to her record. No submissions to Gomes' record. And so we should see a fight on the feet for as many minutes as it lasts. And when it comes to Angela Hill, it more than often than not is going to last. Most of her fights go to decision. She is very much a pitter-patter on the outside type of fighter. Now 39 years old. We'll see how she holds up. She took a beating against Mackenzie Dern. And if you haven't watched that fight, I don't know if you should. I mean, if you're trying to bet Angela Hill, definitely don't. But she's on a bit of a skid and really losing 2 or 4 of her last 6 fights. And it's hard to really see anywhere where she's going to improve from here. She's not going to be adding new wrinkles into her games. You know, she's going to be doing volume at range to try and win on the scorecards. Not really damaging strikes, but enough. And she's facing D. Gomes, who really is a dog. She's a finisher. She was an underdog in her last 2 fights, and people are really going to want to harp on that Yasmin Uregi finish in 20 seconds. You don't really learn much when you finish somebody in 20 seconds. What you do learn in women's MMA, though, in particular, is that they've got power because that just doesn't really happen often. Now, we don't know how durable Uregi is. I'm sure she's less durable than Angela Hill, just given her time and tenure and how much we've seen out of Hill over the past almost decade or decade plus. But it'll be interesting. Where D has struggled in the past is that takedown defense, and I doubt she's going to get really challenged there. It'd be interesting to see if Angela Hill really went for one and notched her first sub. Those would be long odds. Not sure what those are, but we should get a fight that's going to be standing for all 15 minutes if it goes that round, and I think it will. So it's not really going to be an exciting fight. You're going to see more powerful strikes from Gomes, more volume from Hill, and it's going to be up to the judges to differentiate between the two. Andy, I'd love to see how you have the fight.
Yeah, so you know this, and some of the readers might from when we used to write our write-ups for the site, but I'm not the biggest Angela Hill guy, not at all. I'm more of a Jamal Hill guy. But I think for her, it's just very telling that the UFC took her from a main event, and she's a ranked fighter in her division, right? And now she is the third fight on this prelims of the 13-fight card. It's just so random with her, and I don't know if it's necessarily disrespectful or if they're really trying to put Gomes in this position to where, all right, you fought Angela Hill, now you can be ranked. Who do you want in the top 12, top 10 type of thing? I don't know what the strategy is here. What I do know is I totally agree. I favor the volume here. I don't think that Hill's going to get put out. Hill has absorbed plenty of shots, as we've seen throughout her career, and is just fine. Even at the age of 38, which is insane. She's had 23 fights. She's 38 years old. She's not going out in this fight either, even though it's on enemy soil, even though she has a 15-year age gap between the 23-year-old Gomes. I do really think that she's going to be able to soak up that damage and in turn still be able to load up on the volume. So even though I'm not her biggest fan, I am going to be taking Angela Hill to win the fight here for 1 unit on Caesars at plus 110. And I am going to tease this here because I'm not going to, not NFL tease, folks. This isn't Sharpen the Public. But I am going to say that I love the over 2.5 rounds at minus 300 as a parlay leg, which I'm going to throw into a parlay later in the preview. So stay tuned for that. But what betting angles do you see on this one?
Yeah, so I see this fight sort of similar to the first fight of the night between Fernandes and between Diakiese, where you've got somebody that's going to burn hot early, and they likely will get ahead on the scorecards because of that. And then as the fight goes on, the more experienced veteran fighter with cardio and a full camp as well. In this case, both have full camp. But they start to pull away. And I think that what happens in those matchups is you get close decisions. And that's been that's been Angela Hill's entire career. She's had numerous split decisions across her UFC tenure, I think 5 or so roughly. And I think that this is a prime candidate for another one. The over-under is 2.5 with the over at minus 300. And so I'm going to take Angela Hill by split decision or majority decision at plus 500 as a hedge to having Gomes at minus 140 for an entire unit. I think that the only way Angela Hill wins is by a split or majority decision. I think that first round is definitely going to go Gomes. And then the second will be tight, if not Gomes. So I think that if Angela Hill wins, it's going to be by a controversial decision. And I just don't think it happens. So it's adding a little bit more juice to my card, but I think it's protecting me a little bit because I don't think she wins by running away with it. So I've got Gomes. Andy has Gomes. We'll see you at the pay window.
I've got Hill.
I've got
Hill. No. I've got Hill. So I've got Hill. No. I've got Hill money line plus 110 on Caesars, and I can get you Gomes money line minus 125 on DraftKings. So give you a little bit better odds there as to pair with your hedge of Hill at split decision or majority decision. I think the volume is going to be the difference there, as well as absolutely love the over, which I'll tie into a later play. Keep it locked in with us here as we continue on and preview Vitor Petrino versus Modestas Bukauskas.
And for the fourth fight of the night, we've got an undefeated fighter in Vitor Petrino, 9-0, 2-0 in the UFC now, facing off against Modestas Bukauskas, 15-5, now 3-3 in the UFC. Bukauskas, this is his second stint, so was 1-3 in his first stint. Had to leave, came back, is now 2-0 in his second stint, and is still much of the same fighter. He's a kickboxer by trade. He's going to stand at distance. He moves fairly well, but does tend to get caught up against the fence. He's now been knocked out 3 times in his career. So while his durability isn't necessarily a chink in his armor, it's not a strong suit by any way either. And given who he's fighting in Vitor Petrino, I think that could come to be a little bit of a problem here. Vitor Petrino is essentially a new age Paulo Costa in a way, but he fights. So 2-0 in the UFC now. Now Petrino at 9-0, 4 of his 9 wins have a combined 1-23 record. That is 4 fights that he's gone and fought a combination of a 1-23 record. So some of the opponents have been questionable, but we know exactly what he is. I mean, he's a freak physique. He is as strong and ripped as you could imagine, and operates in just the fashion that you would imagine someone that looks like him does. He throws everything into every strike. He 110%. Everything is with the intent to knock you out, and he's got good top control and wrestling as well. His cardio is a little questionable, but I'm not really sure if Bukauskas is going to be the one to question that. But with that said, he leaves a lot of gaps. As he goes forward. He has big swings, big motions. And Bukauskas as a kickboxer, he's very accurate. He's very technical. And while he might lack power in some instances, just that straight knockout power and volume, he can hit people clean. And I think that there's going to be some opportunities to counterstrike if he can defend those takedowns for him to be able to see success here. And the odds opened up. Let me pull them up real quick. I know they opened up short of 200. They opened up at -275 actually for Petrino, and they've moved down all the way to -235 after having a dip all the way down to -200 for a short period. So people sold on Petrino initially at the price, got it all the way down to where he was -200, and now it's back up a little bit. And so I'm going to buy back into Bukauskas here at +200. I think that there's definitely an avenue where Petrino can be able to get the takedowns, land a big punch, and put Bukauskas out and really put his name into the stars. But I think that Bukauskas has made some minor adjustments to his style and to his movement that'll keep him off the fence. I think that he'll be able to hit Petrino clean on an intermittent on the in-betweens. And I think that we could end up seeing Bukauskas either win this by decision, being really passive and defensive, or we could see him getting a knockout where he's able to wobble Petrino and then take advantage of it. But Andy, I'd love to see where you have this fight because it's a weird one by the odds.
Yeah, so I took instead of taking a side, I actually took a total here. I like the under 2.5, and I think that Bukauskas has improved his takedown defense and maybe stops what Petrino wants to do offensively. But I just see more paths for either of these guys getting finished, where Petrino can get it done on the feet. He's got 6 KOs outside of the UFC and a submission win after dominating the Pleasure Man himself in his return to UFC action. Also, he has 2 of his 3 losses by knockout that happened in the UFC, and they were to Khalil Roundtree and Jimmy Crute. And I feel like those 2 losses are likely similar competition skill-wise, potentially to what Petrino offers here. I know you're not as high on Petrino in this bout specifically, but I think that Petrino has the potential to maybe kind of fit in with those names of Roundtree and Crute in the division at his peak. However, there's also a path here where Petrino gets gassed, and then Modestas kind of takes advantage and gets the finish on the more green fighter in a sense, where Petrino is a bit newer. He doesn't have a ton of fights under his belt. And realistically here, like, he hasn't had a very hard run to start in the UFC, in my opinion. Like, those first 2 fights were really not that difficult. So I'm going to go with under 2.5 rounds here at -143. That's for a unit. And I'll probably tail you on your play. I'm not going to endorse it myself, but I probably will go with the dog here because I do agree that I think that the odds should be a bit closer than that. And it's interesting that they have kind of teeter-totted and went from super favored to Petrino at first, down, and then started to head back up. And maybe that's also just the favorites effect as we kind of see as the week goes on, right? Where people continue to just slam the favorite and it just goes up as the week goes along. So I've got the under 2.5 here at -143. Rick has Bukauskas +200. What unit size are you doing on that?
Half unit here. Not overly confident, but still like it.
There we go. Those are our 2 plays for the fight. Stay with us as we continue on with Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Elizeu Zaleski.
All right, now in the middle of our prelims, we have Elizeu Zaleski facing off against Rinat Fakhretdinov. Fakhretdinov now 3-0 in the UFC, 22-2 all time. And Zaleski 10-3 in the UFC, a forgotten name that came back in June of this year, won a close split decision against Abubakar Magomedov as basically a pick'em fight. We knew it was going to be close, and it provided to be just as close as everyone expected. So he's had some fights canceled over the past number of years now, was scheduled to fight the likes of Bilal Muhammad, the Leech, Jingliang Li, who he ended up fighting in 2019 and lost via knockout. But then names like Shavkat Rakhmonov, Munir Lazez, so talented guys. We all know how good he is. I mean, shit, he knocked out Sean Strickland by a spinning hook kick. No one does that. Israel Adesanya couldn't figure that out, and Strickland broke his will. So, I mean, he is a talented striker. Now he's had a bunch of USADA suspensions, and he really needs to keep the distance to be able to land that damage with those kicks and punches. He's not going to be given that. He's not going to be given time to find the range against Fakhretdinov, and I'll let Andy get into that. But Zaleski coming on, he's had 2 fights now since the end of 2020, so in just over 39 months now, and so it'll be interesting to see how he really comes back and continues to progress at the age of 36, or if he progresses at all. So it's an interesting one. Andy, what do you see in Fakhretdinov?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a bit more one-sided than we think, where I think that I agree with you. Like, Zaleski has that dynamic striking ability where he knocked out somebody who is as durable as Sean Strickland. But with Fakhretdinov's fight style, it's just his bread and butter is his ground game, where he gets you down and then goes to work. And he completely demolished an electric fighter like Brian Battle. I know that's not necessarily a name that ranks up with some of the ones that Zaleski has fought, but with seeing Brian Battle's rise and how dynamic of a fighter he is, as well as like what Fakhretdinov has done in the past, I just feel like he's going to be able to get it done here. He's so dominant when it comes to getting guys to the mat or in the clinch. And I think that he should also be getting a ranking after this fight. Whoever wins this one is probably going to go into the top 15. He's like if it doesn't happen right after this fight, maybe it happens in a couple months as Amosov, Randy Rudeboy, Neil Magny, and Vicente Luque all have fights in the next 3 months. So one of them loses, and if he doesn't go up after this weekend, then he'll go up here in the coming months if he gets the win. I think he's priced a little too far out to be a parlay leg, but what I would say is, like, some of these big favorites, if you feel one way about them early on in the week or even weeks in advance, just try to get in early and like lock it up into a parlay. If your book has open parlays, which is rare to find nowadays, but if you still have a book that does that, something like that gives you an opportunity to lock in some of these that are always going to get you a positive CLV, if not always, like 95% of the time, because people love slamming these huge favorites. And he's turned into that where it's almost unaffordable at minus 350. But just kind of curious to see what your thoughts on him are as the fighter in this matchup, as well as how you're getting an angle on this. Because me personally, I cannot find a betting angle on this one because I like Fakhretdinov that much.
Yeah, and I want to continue to touch on that point that you were making about getting in on favorites early, and that might take us over the 5 minutes here. But for this, for the point that we're making, I think it's important to sort of drive home. So excuses if we go a little bit over the 5 minutes here. But getting in on those fighters early is imperative. And given that we aren't going to release the podcast until Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week of, most of the time that time has passed. So make sure to follow us on Twitter. You've got Andy at Andy HH Sports, and I'm at Rick HH Sports, because we can tweet out some of those plays early that we identify and know that we'll be on, even if we're not on them. And I say that as a caveat, as in Fakhretdinov opened up, I think, around minus 275 or so. He's up to minus 350. Both of the Bonfim brothers, I know Gabriel in the co-main event has moved about 200-300 points. So you can get both sides, even if you're not like set on, I want that guy to win. If you know that the public's going to be on him, which we've given our expertise and the time that we've done this can realize, you can drive home a lot of value where you can end up taking the other side and profit regardless. Even if you didn't want that guy, you can get off them. So I think that's a really important point as we continue to move forward, especially with this fight card, because there are a lot of heavy favorites. So now getting back to the actual fight that we're talking about, Fakhretdinov is just a world-class freestyle wrestler. He is not going to give anybody any time. And if you watch that Brian Battle fight, I mean, I don't even know if I'd recommend it. And there's the horn, but I'll go on for just a couple minutes here, or just a minute. I mean, he wrestled Brian Battle. I think he held him down for 13 minutes of that fight. And it's
so
impressive
one-sided
how he's able to do it. His wrist control on the ground, his top pressure, and his ability to keep guys along the cage is very interesting. And most fighters, when they wrestle, want to have it in open space because they can use the opponent can use the cage to get back up. He uses it as an impediment to his opponent, and it's brilliant. And Zaleski has struggled historically with guys who wrestle and they throughout. And so while his striking is dangerous, I just don't think he's going to be able to use it. Fakhretdinov is just going to jump right into to wrestling, and he'll likely get a finish. So Fakhretdinov now at minus 350. I don't have that. I've got the under in this fight. I think that Zaleski at aging is either going to struggle on the ground, or we're going to have some dangerous fight on the feet. So I'm going to take the under. I would take Fakhretdinov inside the distance at minus 110, but with the under 2.5 being minus 110 as is, I don't see a point. Cover yourself with the risk. Take the under 2.5. If the fight ends in the last 2.5 minutes of the third round, then you say fuck me and you move on. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to move on to the sixth fight of the night. We've got Daniel Marcos facing UFC debutant. That doesn't sound right. Victor Hugo. We'll see you there. Hopefully, I can figure it out by then.
Coming up next, we've got Daniel Marcos at 15-0 versus Victor Hugo, who is coming in on his UFC debut and has the nickname of Striker, as you can see in Rick's name case. If you're watching on YouTube, find us on YouTube at Happy Hour Sports. Rick, I have a question for you. Your nickname is Striker as well with Victor Hugo. Do you know off the top of your head, without looking, how many submission victories Striker has in his career? He has fought professionally 28 times.
7. I mean, I can tell you because I did the notes, but like, if you're trying to catch me off guard here, I can play dumb, but I don't want to play dumb to our viewers.
He has 9 submissions and 8 knockouts. So I think that we should call him, the rest of the preview, we should call him Submission instead of Striker. So Submission is on his UFC debut here after rattling off a 13-fight winning streak, including a victory on Dana White's Contender Series in the beginning of October this year. So he's got a 1-month turnaround from his Dana White Contender Series win heading into this fight this weekend in Brazil. Daniel Marcos, on the other hand, has had 2 fights in the UFC under his belt, both this year, and he had a Dana White Contender Series victory in 2022. He's still got that perfect 15-0 record to his name as a professional fighter. Rick, my question for you is, what do you see in this fight here as Marcos is sitting around a minus 250 favorite paired with that unblemished record that he's coming into the bout with?
Yeah, I mean, I go Hugo. And that's a very that's a very quick answer, but his record, you don't often see male UFC fighters with 28 fights on their record coming into the UFC. Typically you'll see him hot, sort of like Petrino, where you're 9-0, Marcos, where you're 13-0, and then you jump in or you've hit a run. And he's just been on an incredible tear early in his career. I mean, 2011 to 2013, he fought like 11 times in very small, questionable competitions. So his record is a little bit inflated from that, but over the past now 8 years, he's been fighting better competition and he's been winning dominantly. And so he is a guy that on the feet, I mean, he can land with overhand rights. He's got a left hook that's powerful and he loves to sit down on. He leaves a little bit to be desired on the in-betweens. Like he can get hit. He'll leave his head out there and he holds his hands low as fuck. Excuse my language. But he's got solid kicks. So more or less, it's all offense. His takedowns are good. His BJJ is fantastic. I mean, submissions he has 9 submissions to his name. Our guy's submissions here, I mean, he can get it done anywhere. Now he's taking the fight on short notice, and he's going up against a pretty defensively sound Marcos. But we know exactly what Marcos is going to do. He's going to box your ears in from range. He's going to work the body really well and sit down on some body shots, which I love. And he's got some good leg kicks, but they're just to the legs. He doesn't do much to the body or head. And he's good defensively in scrambles, but he's not going to do much offensively. He's not going to threaten submissions. He has 0 submissions to his name. So I doubt that he's going to be able to get the advantage on a guy like Hugo here. But it's an interesting fight. It's a little bit of a weird one there. And so I've got the underdog Hugo at plus 206 to win outright. to win. I'm not placing a bet on that. My bets are going to go on Hugo inside the distance at plus 350. I think that Marcos I think his undefeated record goes away here. But then I'm also going to take under 2.5 at minus 145, similar to your under 2.5 at minus 143 earlier. I think that he knows what he's got to do here. And I think that Marcos, with, I believe, 2 decisions in his 2 UFC fights, nope, he won his first via knees to the body against Simon Oliveira. But I think that we get a much closer fight. The Davy Grant fight against him was interesting, where his volume wasn't great, and Davy Grant was able to take it to him. Now, he busted up Davy Grant, and I think that he'll be able to bust up Hugo here some, but I think that Hugo will really push it out of Marcos, especially in Brazil. And we've got a veteran fighter who knows how to do that. So give me the under, and give me Hugo to win inside the distance for a full unit on the under.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Hugo has a couple more paths to victory than Marcos does. I feel like Hugo, too, even though this is his UFC debut on a short notice, he has that home crowd backing, which I love a lot for the underdog here, especially that big of an underdog at plus 200. I'm going to just take him straight up on the money line at plus 200. You can find that at a couple spots: DK, BetMGM, Caesars. There's several spots where they have him at plus 200 right now. That's the way I'm going to go, just because I don't want to get too cute with it. But I do agree with your reasoning behind the inside the distance as well as with the under there. I think that it's definitely a much better value play than just taking the dog here like I am. So I'm going to go with Victor Hugo at plus 200 for half a unit. Rick's got Hugo inside the distance plus 350 for a quarter of a unit, as well as under 2.5 minus 145 for a full unit. Stay with us as we start to get into the main card here and kick it off. The first of the Bonfim brother duos, with Ismael Bonfim taking on Vinc Pichel. Coming up next, we're going to preview Ismael Bonfim versus Vinc Pichel. Before we do that, I just want to mention, I know you may have noticed that we are skipping over the Elvis Brenner fight, as his opponent is no longer going to be fighting. He now is taking on Kainan Krasuski. I probably got close on that one. Apologies if I did not. Esteban Ribovic dropped out literally last night as we were prepping. So unfortunately, we've not had enough time to really get this one right and present it to you guys with the sufficient research that we try to do for every single fight when we put it on the pod. So if we end up having a play on this fight, when we research it later, we'll definitely tweet it out. Again, make sure to follow us at AndyHH Sports, at RickHH Sports, and at HH Sports HQ. But for now, we will go ahead and jump into the main card with the first of the Bonfim brothers taking on Vinc Pichel. Rick, what do you see with this one?
I think it's an interesting one. I think you've got Bonfim, who both Bonfim brothers have come in with a ton of hype, and obviously Ismael is up to minus 465 on my book, but and he's up to minus 500 in other books as well. So I mean, he's continuing to grow. But it's an interesting fight. Vinc Pichel has been around the UFC for a long time. He's 7-3 in the UFC and has had sustained success. He's continuing to beat solid fighters, not great fighters. I think his best win, in my opinion, to date is Jim Miller, which, I mean, is a respectable fighter. Everyone loves Jim Miller if you've been around the sport for a while. And Roosevelt Roberts, who ended up leaving the UFC. So his opponents have not been great, and he's only fought once in the past now 26 months. So, and that one fight was a loss to Mark Madston, who's just a wrestler by trade. So it's an interesting fight. He's got a different, more fun opponent in Bonfim, who's a boxer by trade. He's got a 24-3 amateur boxing record, and he's fast. I mean, he's lightning fast, and that's an issue for a guy like Pichel, who's getting up there in age. I say getting up there. I mean, he's at the big 4-0 now. He's up to 40, and he hasn't fought now. And as I said, now he's since that loss, since that loss, he hasn't fought now in over 18 months. So I really struggle to see how he's going to deal with some of that boxing, but he could use his offensive wrestling to be able to get it to the ground. Now, I don't know if that's the best way to go. Bonfim himself, though he's a boxer, does have some good submissions. But he should be able to use his speed on the feet to land more powerful boxing. And I think that because of that, he's going to end up pulling out here, and that's why he's such a big favorite. I mean, this feels like a big get back on the right track after a loss to Benoit Saint Denis. for him to just go in and cement himself back in the UFC and back in the limelight near his brother.
Yeah, Pichel is just such a forgotten about UFC veteran because he's been around for a long time. But I mean, the 7-3 UFC record doesn't really reflect that for someone that has been with the promotion for a minute now. I'm with you. I really like Bonfim here. It just sucks that it's become to the point where it's so unaffordable to bet on this fight when you're just wanting to take one side. For me, I do think that this is going to be that get right spot for him. He does leave some of those big holes when he's moving forward. However, the speed is what's going to catch the old man here, unfortunately. I mean, it is what it is. The speed is what's going to fly off the TV as soon as you see this fight. And that's what we love about the Bonfim brothers as a whole. And that's especially what I love about Ismael, where the speed for him is what's going to make the difference, because I don't think that he's going to use the submission game as much as you would expect him to in this bout. He's going to try to land a lot more damage, especially with how rowdy this home crowd's going to be as this kind of opens up the main card. Have you found any angles that you're able to bet this one? Because for me, even though I'd love to back and put some money on Ismael here, I can't justify it, man. It's too big. He's too big of a favorite, and you have to really get cheeky with how you bet it, in my opinion.
No, I don't have anything that I'm currently on. I might end up going on a Bonfim inside the distance. I know how chalky that is, or an under, just because of Pichel's age and his time away from the octagon. I don't know where Pichel's head's going to be at here. I mean, you're 40 years old. If you win this, where do you go? You're 8-3 in the UFC. You're 1-1 in your last two with a loss to Marc Madsen. How much more do you have in your tank? Are you going to make where are you going towards? And I think that this just sets up for a Bonfim to get back on track. I think it is interesting that Bonfim's two losses come to Benoit Saint Denis, and then the other in 2014 to Renato Moicano in the first round of Jungle Fight 71 by rear naked choke. So his two losses have come by submission. He's got two more, but they were 2011. Those were two of his first fights, and I sort of discredit those. But he's got a lot of first-round finishes too. I think that Vinc Pichel could fall on his sword here. He has a famous quote where he goes, "Finish or get fucked." So I think that Pichel's either going to get finished or he's going to fuck him up. So give me the under. I'll throw it officially now that I'm talking about it and getting hyped up about it. But both of us go Pichel. Not Pichel. We do not go Pichel. I think both of us go Bonfim. I'll take the under at -130 at 2.5. And we will see you on the next fight.
And coming up next, we have Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan. Vieira here is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu background. So he's got a 9-2 record with 8 subs to prove that he has that BJJ background. He's got one submission loss, one decision loss, but then one knockout finish to his name to round out that 9th victory. 2 wins in 2020 and 2019 with the UFC are no longer in the promotion. And he has losses to Anthony Hernandez and Chris Curtis. I feel like his 2 wins were against a bit overrated competition. I'm interested to see how you feel about that too, with Stoltzfus and Brundage. But for Petrosyan, he's got that Muay Thai background, so it is quite the clash of styles in this bout, which is going to be really exciting. 8-2 record with 5 KOs, 3 decision wins, and then he's got 1 knockout loss as well as 1 decision loss. I think he's got a lot more impressive of a resume than Vieira does, where he's got wins over G-Rod, AJ Dobson, Chris Duncan, and then that 1 loss against Caio Borralho, which is kind of funny because Caio Borralho fights next on this card. So stay tuned with us. We'll preview that as well. I think that this fight comes down to if Petrosyan can stifle the takedowns and piece up Vieira on the feet. I just don't know if he can or not, because I think that's a really tall task with how talented Vieira is and how much of a submission king that he is. And that's like such a historically, I feel like such the difference maker when you put a jiu-jitsu guy against a Muay Thai guy, or even just a jiu-jitsu guy against a striker in general. What are you seeing with this one where you feel like we can maybe find an angle? Because the betting odds on this are pretty much at a pick'em at most books, where it's -110 both ways, which is not, you don't see that very often in the UFC, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a reason. This is one of the few fights that's a pick'em, and I think that for every reason, it's justifiably a pick'em. I mean, it is the biggest clash of styles you could imagine. I mean, Petrosyan is that world-class Muay Thai, and he's one of the best Muay Thai fighters in the world, and he's going up against one of the best BJJ specialists in the world. So, I mean, you have a natural, like, who is going to get the edge? Can Petrosyan keep on the feet? Can Vieira get it to the ground? And if you're questioning whether or not he's one of the best BJJ black belts in the world, here is, if you can see it, his picture on Tapology, which is not a UFC picture. That is BJJ competition. Like he is a competition BJJ guy, and I think that end of the day, he's going to be able to get to Petrosyan. Now, Petrosyan, to your point, he's fought a couple overrated guys. Is that who were you talking about, Petrosyan or Vieira?
I think Vieira's wins over Stoltzfus and Brundage were a bit overrated. Like I don't have as much respect for Brundage and Stoltzfus as I do for Petrosyan's victories, which came against AJ Dobson, G-Rod, and Chris Duncan.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I disagree somewhat there. I don't respect Stoltzfus much. I do respect some of what Cody Brundage can do and the challenge that he could pose to Vieira a little bit more than Petrosyan. And AJ Dobson to me is he's solid. He's waning a little bit. The Gregory Rodriguez fight is Gregory Rodriguez, and then Christian Leroy Duncan is he's all right. But either way, regardless, neither of them have faced the top ranked fighters, phenomenal fighters, other than that Gregory Rodriguez fight largely. And I think that at the end of the day, that we'll end up seeing Vieira be able to get to Petrosyan. And he is just so unbelievably slippery on the ground that even though he will get dropped, which he more than likely could in this fight, I think that he could end up trapping Petrosyan in a spot that he doesn't want to be in once he gets there. And so I lean towards Vieira. Really, my favorite bet in this fight is for it not to go the distance. I don't think that the clash of styles will cause both to do nothing, which can happen. And say the old Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero fight, which was the most boring fight. I do not encourage you to watch it. That or the Carlos Esparza versus Rose
Thug Rose.
Yeah, Thug Rose. Sid.
That's mine.
Yeah, right. If we ever talk about, well, I won't say that. But my favorite bet's fight not to go the distance, which is minus 200. So don't rip it straight. But that's something that you easily and that I would parlay with Fakhretdinov straight. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. You'll get basically even odds there, more or less. Might be minus 110. But that's your form of an MMA teaser right there. Instead of going with the total at 2 or 1.5, go with the fight not to go the distance. Play it safe. One of these guys is bound to end up either dropping and finishing the other or submitting the other. And I think that that's a pretty safe bet with Fakhretdinov, who's going to avoid punishment the entire time. So I like Vieira to get it done by submission. I'm not going to play that. Just give me him straight. And I'll also go with fight not to go the distance.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you on that play. I'm not going to endorse it as one of my own, but I will put my money on it and ride that with you. What I am going to do here is I am going to go with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist himself, Rodolfo Vieira. I think that just historically, as well as what we've seen in recent history too, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys that are that talented and are specialists like that, they find multiple ways to get it done, and they're willing to get hit hard and hit often just to find an angle where they can latch onto you and then take care of business. I think that's what's going to happen here, where especially with the home crowd backing him, he should be able to get the job done. And I'm going to go with minus 110 here for a unit on Vieira money line. Rick, again, is going to be parlaying the fight not to go the distance at minus 200 with Fakhretdinov minus 350. That will get you a parlay somewhere around the even money to minus 110 range, and he's doing that for a unit as well. Stay with us as we continue to preview, as I hinted earlier, Caio Borralho taking on Abus Magomedov. Coming up next, we have Caio Borralho, one of the hottest Brazilian prospects in the promotion, coming up against Abus Magomedov, who is coming off of a headlining fight against Sean Strickland where it was a brutal loss. Let's just leave it at that. Rick, this might be one of my favorite matchups on the card. Caio, in my opinion, looks like the Walmart version of Paulo Costa, where he's got the neck tat, he's got the glasses, he's got like the build of Paulo Costa, but he just looks like if you're going to go buy a Walmart version, that's what he looks like. However, what I want to say here, and I'll let you kind of elaborate with it, he's on an incredible streak here in the UFC, has not lost at the promotion yet, and has several fights under his belt. I just don't know who he's fought competition-wise, where I've been backing him a lot over the last couple of years now because I think that he's that talented, he's that good. But the competition for me, this is going to be his biggest test to date, where Magomedov was good enough to come into the UFC, get a win, and then immediately get a fight against Sean Strickland to headline a card. And yes, he got absolutely dominated by Sean Strickland in the second round. But in that first round, things looked like pretty good for him, honestly, where there was some really good back and forth in that first round with the now champion, who Israel Adesanya struggled with. We talked about that earlier. Like, Sean Strickland is no joke, and he's been in form now for a while, ever since the end of last year when he felt like he was done a disservice in the fight against Cannonier that, like, ended the UFC calendar. I think that, like, he got a really wild version of Strickland, and he handled him well in the first round, but again, like, did not handle him well towards the end. Maybe that's more of an MMA math analysis, but interested to hear what your thoughts are.
No, as it pertains to Magomedov, I entirely agree. I think it was a little premature to give him a main event slot in his second fight. But Sean Strickland has shown now, since that Cannonier fight, like you said, where he's made the adjustment. For like a number of fights there in the in-between, he was able just to pitter-patter and play his defense, which made for boring fights visually, but also close decisions. And he sort of made that change where he's like, you know what? I know my weapon is my cardio and my pressure and my defense as well as my boxing. He's like, I'm just going to push forward. I'm just going to keep on my foot on the gas every minute and not allow my opponent to breathe. And it started with Magomedov, and you saw Magomedov, it felt like he almost just wanted to take a breath. And just be like, dude, just give me 1 second. Like, just give me 1 second to, like, and he didn't allow him to do that. And by the second round, I mean, he's just exhausted, which cardio shouldn't be that bad. But, I mean, we saw the exact same thing happen with Adesanya, where you're like, why does Adesanya look like he shouldn't even be a ranked fighter here? Like, he couldn't even throw or really, like, fight much back to Strickland because that pressure just does not allow you any ability to implement your own game plan. Borralho is not just going to give you all the time in the world. But we should see a much, much better Magomedov, where the plus 250 odds feel a little harsh here. And that doesn't mean that I'm on Magomedov necessarily, but plus 250 is a bit steep. And like you said, Borralho really has not had a phenomenal level of competition, but he's been a co-main event in 3 of his 4 fights, and we'll see. And he's not the co-main event in this one, but he's still in the main card, and we're going to see if he really has the ability to stand toe to toe with Magomedov here, as it'll be interesting. He's beaten Armen Petrosyan on the feet before, and he's beaten Maka Olajeszek by rear naked choke as well. So he's beaten other guys that have really, really powerful striking. But Magomedov is no stranger to the ground. He's got a number of submission wins to his name. He's slick there too. But that's where Borralho is the favorite, and that's why he's the favorite, is because of that ground game, because of those takedowns and that submission ability, and the ability just to control fights. 3 of his 4 fights, as I said, have been co-main events. 3 of his 4 fights have also gone to decision because of that nature, where he's pretty defensively sound on the ground. He's going to make sure he controls you. He's going to win the round and make sure that he doesn't really take any damage in the process. So it's one of those clean, no risk, I'm going to win the rounds. And I could see him trying to implement that game plan here against Magomedov and trying to tire him out. I'm interested to see what Magomedov has done to improve that cardio, because that cardio was garbage, regardless of what Strickland did. But I think that it can't look that bad again, just because Caio is not Strickland in the way that he pressures. So it's an interesting fight. The odds are weird.
Yeah, I just think the odds should be a little bit tighter. I think that we're getting some really good value and a great spot for Magomedov here. Don't get it twisted. I am a Borralho fan. That's why I felt open to teasing him at the beginning of the fight, making fun of him a little bit, because I like him. I think he's a lot of fun to watch. I think he's exciting, and he's going to hopefully be in the UFC for a long time. For me, when the value discrepancy is this big, I'm going to go in on Magomedov. So I'm actually even going for the full unit here. Give me Magomedov plus 250 for the full unit. Rick, what are you going with here?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the Tapology voters are on Borralho, which doesn't make me feel great. It feels like everyone's just forgotten about Magomedov and his track record and ability. And Magomedov's also been training with wrestlers. So he's clearly trying to improve that side of the game, knowing that Borralho is going to test him there. I think it'll be a really close fight. I think it's going to be a close enough fight. I'm going to go with Borralho to win the fight, but I'm going to take Borralho. This is just a trend of this card. I haven't done this in the past, but Borralho by split or majority decision at plus 700. And I'm going to put a quarter unit on that. I think that this could be a really tight fight across multiple rounds where Borralho might dominate it on the ground or have the top control and do some damage, but not too much. And I think we could have some questionable scorecards here. Especially with it being in Brazil, if Abus does a little bit more damage, but Borralho has the control, I might score at Magomedov, judges might score at Borralho. I think that we could get in a situation like that. So I've got Borralho in the fight. Andy's got Magomedov. We're split on the pick. It's a close fight, much closer than the odds indicate. And we will see you at, somehow on the main card, Rodrigo Nascimento and Don'Tale Mayes. All right, with the co-main event, we have Rodrigo Nascimento and Don'Tale Mayes somehow on the main card. It should not be in any sense. We have so many better fights on this card, including the two that we just previously covered, where you've got world-class fighters in different styles, whether it be BJJ or Muay Thai. And we're sitting here with Don'Tale Mayes, who's 10-5. He's 3-3 in the UFC, and he really hasn't shown much for anybody to be excited about. And on the other side, you've got Rodrigo Nascimento, who's 3-1 in the UFC. So you might think, hey, he's a good fighter. Well, two of his wins are by split decision, to Tanner Boser and to Ilir Latifi. Ilir Latifi looks like, I hope Latifi never sees this, but he looks like one of the people. I'm blanking on the roast that I'm trying to make. It looks not a munchkin. One of the Charlie
Oompa Loompa.
He looks like an Oompa Loompa. Thank you so much. If you were to paint him for Halloween, you would think that he's an authentic Oompa Loompa. And Nascimento struggled against him, and that's to discredit. I mean, that's a discredit to Latifi, but Latifi's not a high level UFC fighter. Nascimento's X factor in the UFC is his speed. He's a lighter heavyweight, and so that difference in speed can really make a big difference. And we'll talk about it in the main event as well with Almeida. But he hasn't. I mean, it hasn't shown. That's what he came in with, and it really hasn't been as dominant as we thought it would be. His striking isn't as clean. It's not as dominant. And granted, he's training at American Top Team, but I don't know if that's the best thing for him because he's getting less one-on-one time. It's a huge gym. So I'm not sold on Nascimento as a fighter, but I'm definitely not sold on Don'Tale Mayes. So I hope you have more for this fight because I just don't think that – I mean, Mayes has some ability to get takedowns and do some leg kicks. And, I mean, he's an okay striker at range, but, I mean, he doesn't do anything great, not enough to scare me. And Nascimento doesn't look great either. So,
yeah, I'm not a huge Mayes guy, not a huge Mayes guy at all. I feel like he's really just part of the promotion because of John Jones. But I think with Nascimento – he should be able to replicate, and I should have touched on this, or you should have at the beginning. This is a rematch fight. They fought once in 2020. So, he might be able to replicate what happened in that fight where he got the rear naked choke victory on Don'Tale Mayes. I don't know how you get a finish on somebody, and then 3 years later it warrants the rematch when it's literally two bums going up against each other in a heavyweight division with much better names. But here we are, and in my opinion, Rick, I just don't think Mayes has changed at all. It is clear that Mayes cannot handle UFC caliber fighters with more than striking to their game at heavyweight. And Nascimento has that. He has some different foils to his game. He has more foils to his game than Don'Tale Mayes. So although Nascimento is not a world beater, as you touched on, I just don't see him having any trouble with Mayes once again. Why would he? Has Mayes improved his game that much over the last 3.5 years? I can pretty confidently say no, he has not. So I teased it earlier. I have the second parlay leg for what I'm going to do with that Angela Hill and Denise Gomes over 2.5. That was a minus 300 parlay leg. You obviously have to go with a lower leg for your second leg when you do that, and that's going to be Nascimento money line at minus 180. Don't take it straight up. If you're going to take somebody straight up on this, get creative with it and be smart about what that second leg is. I don't mind Nascimento as a parlay leg, but don't take it straight up. Don't lay minus 180 juice on a heavyweight fight, honestly, ever. Unless his name is John Jones. But this parlay comes out to around plus 101, and I'll be taking that for a full unit. What did you end up coming up with for this fight that is undeservedly on the main card?
Nothing I want to put real money on. It's worth noting that Dontel Mays and he's 3-3 in the UFC. His 3 losses, he was the underdog in, and his 3 times that he was favored, he won all of those. Now he's a sizable dog in this one. The books have been able to get him right, and I think that we'll see that again. I think Nascimento wins, but I'll be damned if I'm putting real money on this. I probably will 5 minutes before the fight, and then hate myself when my fighter just gasses out. But I'll go Nascimento. I trust him slightly more than I trust Dontel Mays' abilities. And I think that speed could end up hurting Dontel Mays, who's probably wearing the guilt of John Jones right now and tearing his pec. So we'll see. Maybe John Jones just started elbowing. I don't know. Maybe John Jones will lay into Dontel Mays and maybe encourage him to win. But I don't see it.
They're buddies, though. I mean, like, I really think that's why he's here.
The injury was a fluke injury as well.
John
the
Jones?
John Jones injury. They were practicing wrestling, and he was defending a takedown, and he pulled up on John a little bit, and John immediately was just like, and just tore his pec. So I mean, it was a fluke, weird injury where you're just doing general training. Like it wasn't like they were sparring hard and got hurt sparring too hard. But regardless, yeah, right. This is why Max Holloway does not spar everybody. This is why he's better than everyone aside from Volkanovski. Sadly, hopefully we get to cover a Max fight here at some point.
Yeah, but we're moving so far away from this fight because the fight sucks that much. So while the bell is gone, why don't we move on to our next fight, which is Gabriel Bonfim taking on Nicholas Dalby. So keep it locked in with us, and we will head on to the next one.
In our co-main event, we've got the better of the 2 Bonfim brothers, Gabriel, looking for his 16th consecutive win to start his MMA career. Now 15-0 and 4-0 in the UFC. He's looking to really put a statement on a couple of his wins, and is facing Nicholas Dalby, who, despite his age, despite being 38 years old, is now 6-3-1 in the UFC and has won 5 of his last 6 fights. So it feels almost like a co-main event layup, just the same way that we early in the card will get a lot of those debutants getting a guy falling out. It feels almost like they're trying to give Bonfim a respectable opponent that he can beat to continue to have him ascend as a star. But we'll see. Dalby is a tough challenge. He's a tough nut to crack, and he hasn't really faced the top end of the competition. So while this is a step up for Bonfim, it's not as though we're that confident in Dalby's ability to say that it's a gigantic step up. We know that he'll be a test. We know that he's going to want to stay in range and just sort of pitter-patter his way to a decision, which is the way his last 5 fights have gone. And he's mainly a boxer with good defense, and he's defensive-minded. So we'll see if Bonfim is able to, or if he wants to, be aggressive to the point where he can really push in. And I'll correct myself mid-fight here. He's 2-0 in the UFC. I was looking at the wrong note, not 4-0, beating Munir Lazez and Trevin Giles after winning his Dana White's Contender Series fight against Trey Waters by Von Vluchok in round 1. But his last 3 fights, 4 fights even, going back to LFA, have all finished in the first round by choke, and by a different choke each time. And that really is all almost that you need to know about Bonfim. He is as good as it gets when it comes to submissions. 15 wins to date, 3 by knockout, 12 by submission, and it comes in almost every form and fashion you can imagine. And those 3 knockouts are not necessarily all ground and pound knockouts too. He's got the ability on the feet. He's pretty slick there, and he's clean when he goes into those takedowns to get it to the ground. He's not rushing those or pushing those and like reaching for them to where he'd get clipped on the way in. He really does blend the 2 skills very well together to where he can get opponents naturally having to defend themselves to strikes to where he can just be able to jump into a takedown and get it down and then be able to progress from there. So it'll be interesting because Dalby has the cardio to stay for the entire fight and be a challenge. And we'll see if he can open up Dalby the way that not many have in the UFC. Andy, what's sort of your opinion on Bonfim and Dalby here?
I think I'm so fascinated about this one from the skill check standpoint. Like, this is really going to be a really nice test for Bonfim. I respect Dalby's game, and I think like what's going to be so fascinating is that Dalby's never been finished. All 4 of his losses are by decision. and Bonfim has only gotten finishes. That's what's going to be really fun is like the 3 knockouts and 12 submissions going up against a guy who only loses by decision when he loses and has some finishes on his own. So with that, something's going to have to give, right? Where one way or the other, it's going to happen. And whether that's breaking Bonfim's unblemished record or breaking Dalby's not being finished record, like something's going to give here. For me, I wish that there was more ways for us to bet on Bonfim because I do think he gets it done. I think there are some ways that we can get creative and cute. I'm not necessarily a fan of doing that on a ton of fights. But I mean, you found it like where there are a couple angles that you've come at these fights this weekend with. I would love to kind of take a more creative angle on this one. What are you thinking? Because I assume that you might be on a similar wavelength to me here.
Yeah, so the fighters that Dalby has faced throughout both of his 2 UFC tenures, he's the second fighter here that's had 2 stints. And in that first stint, he beat Elizeu Zaleski, who's earlier on this card. He beat him by split decision, and then he actually drew Darren Till. So 2 very respectable fighters. And then he ended up losing 3 in a row to much lesser competition before going to Cage Warriors, getting 3 finishes in a row, and then getting back to the UFC to go back on his draw rampage. But across both stints, though, he really hasn't faced a dominant grappler to the sense that Bonfim is. A guy that'll challenge him in both ways. Yes, Alex Oliveira is talented. Alex Oliveira is 11-10 in the UFC. So I don't think that he's of the level at all of Gabriel Bonfim, and I think that that's where I think everyone expects Bonfim to be able to dominate, is on the ground and be able to get it there and force it there. I think that he could have some challenge in getting it to the ground, but we'll see. It'll be interesting, and I think the X factor in this fight is Gabriel Bonfim, not Gonfim, his ability to make Dalby respect him on the feet. If he's able to do that, if he's able to go toe-to-toe and hurt Dalby or pressure him and really start to land consistently, those takedowns open up and he'll be able to get it to the ground and finish him. I have pretty good confidence in that. But I think that the over is my play. It's 1.5 at the moment. The over/under. I think that we'll get to the second round, and I think that we'll get healthily into the second round. I think Dalby's enough of a defensive-minded fighter with good cardio to be able to do it and take it there. All 10 of his UFC fights have gone to decision. So,
what's the juice on that over?
It's plus 110. You're getting plus money. The books, the books really favor Bonfim. I mean, he opened at minus 350. He's down to minus 600 now. And the books really just think that he's going to be able to dominate in the first round. And you'll probably get a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of your friends that are saying, "Hey, I've got Bonfim by first round." So I'm like, don't do that. Don't take first round specific bets. It's hard. Maybe at the heavyweight division where like Derek Lewis is just going to gas out. But I wouldn't recommend it. I'd just take the over.
Yeah, I love that play.
Yeah,
I love that play, and I'm actually going to take it a step further because I think Bonfim gets the job done. And I think that in turn, nothing is going to break here, where he gets it by decision. So he keeps that perfect record. He gets his first decision victory, and Dalby keeps his unfinished record, where I think Dalby has the means and has the defense and has the cardio to be able to get this over the finish line, even though Bonfim should, in my opinion, dominate. I'm just so high on Bonfim. I think he's going to be a stud in this division for a long time to come. And I think that at plus 350 for Bonfim to win by decision, you're getting really good value. I'm only going to put half a unit on it, but I do sincerely feel that this is pretty good value here. And I'll rock with you on that over too. Again, that's your play, not mine, but I'm going to put some money on that as well. Because if I'm going to go by decision, hell, I may as well make some money of it, making it to 7.5 minutes in. So Rick's got the over 1.5 at plus 110 for a unit. I have Bonfim by decision at plus 350, which has never happened before, but it's going to happen on Saturday. Stay with us as we preview the main event in which this card was built between Jailton Almeida taking on Derek Lewis. And finally, we have Jailton Almeida taking on Derek Lewis in a heavyweight bout, which should position themselves nicely to get a lot of talk as the heavyweight headliner, or formerly headliner. It's now co-main heading into next weekend with the pay-per-view. will have a lot of discussion based on this heavyweight fight that's happening this weekend. So Jailton Almeida is going to position himself nicely because I think this is going to be really one-sided, unfortunately, Rick. There's a lot of baggage coming in with Derek Lewis. I know that he had a great, electric, and honestly hilarious finish with the flying knee in his last fight in the Utah card back in towards the end of July. Before that, though, there were a lot of finishes that he had taken. He said that he wasn't in the right mindset. He said he was eating unhealthy. He said before that fight on the Utah card, he actually got right where he didn't actually have to cut too much weight because he was eating right. He was treating his body well. He was taking training seriously. I don't know what mindset he's in. And quite frankly, for anyone, no matter how much they've been training or doing anything, living a normal life, getting arrested for going over 80 miles an hour more than the speed limit a week before the fight is going to fuck with your head a little bit, no matter who you are. So with that kind of baggage heading into it, before that even happened, or rather before that even hit the news cycle, Jailton Almeida was already sitting at a minus 500 to minus 550 favorite. He's still in that range now. I mean, that news hasn't really moved the line. I'm not going to say it was baked into it because none of us knew, but it is more so on the fighting factor that Almeida has so many paths to victory against Lewis. I don't think that he's going to just like stare him straight in the face and knock him out, but I do think that he has the speed. He has the weird physique in a heavyweight division where he doesn't look as much of a heavyweight as you would expect. Like he looks more like a light heavyweight, in my opinion, just like with his build, and he doesn't look like one of those big old fat guys that you expect when you think of the heavyweight division. I just see this ending with him on Derek Lewis's back somehow, some way, just yanking and pulling on him and getting the submission. But what are your thoughts on this one? I think we side here with the favorite, but interested to see if you see any different methods.
Yeah, I think that your point about it not like being baked in, I think that it doesn't change anything about what we thought Derek Lewis would do going into this fight. And that's why it's not moved. We know that regardless, Derek Lewis is probably the heaviest puncher in the UFC. I don't care if you're, I guess, formerly Francis Ngannou, whoever. Like he is the knockout king. So we knew that. And we knew that over the past few fights, he slowly looked less and less like himself, or that there is less and less fight back to go. He's a UFC boy. He's going to fight over and over and over and over because he doesn't really take that much damage. I mean, when he loses, you lose pretty damn quick when you're Derek Lewis, when you're a heavyweight in general, but especially when you're Derek Lewis. And so he's lost a number of fights in a row. And then that what told me the most and what has really like made my mind up about this fight more than anything else that I've looked at and read, and apologies to Jailton Almeida because this is more Derek Lewis focused, was the interview after that Marcus Rogerio de Lima fight. He went into that fight as a plus 180 underdog, so underdog as well, to a more mobile Marcus Rogerio de Lima, who has 13 knockouts and all this, 10-7 in the UFC, but a mobile fighter. And after he went for the flying knee, which no one expected him to, he was in that post octagon, and they were like, "All right, what was your strategy? Did you come in knowing that?" And he goes, "Man, he's gonna run me around the cage." He's like, "I can't just stand with him. He's gonna I have to try and win it right off the bat." And obviously, that's not how he said it exactly, but his point was, I need to win it quick because I can't stay and bang with these guys. They're just gonna run me around. They're gonna be able to pick me apart at range. I've got to force that out of them. I know I'm stronger than them, and I'll knock him out. He has to do that exact same thing against Almeida. And Almeida is a much better fighter, obviously,
oh my God,
Marcus Rogerio de Lima. He beat Marcos and then is coming to face Jailton now in Jailton's homeland. If you're going to go Lewis, bet him round one plus 550. He's plus 375-ish right now, plus 350, maybe 400. Bet him plus 550 round one, and then ladder it into round two. There's no need to go to round 3, 4, 5. He's not going to win there. I promise. If he does, I'm not going to pay your bet back, but you can come at me. Now, I'm not going to go Derek Lewis. I've been fading him for a while now. I'm tired of what seems to me like he's trying to pick up a paycheck, and I know that's way watered down. That's disrespectful to Derek, but I don't think that he is in the game knowing that he can fight for a title. I think that he knows he can put on a show, and he wants to do that real quick. He's not going to focus on his cardio because he's a heavyweight. He knows what he is. He's going to go out there, have fun. If he gets slept, he gets slept. And I think it's going to happen quick.
I'm with you. For me, it's tough because Almeida has teetered kind of back and forth between being the biggest favorite to now Bonfim being the biggest favorite, but he's been one of the biggest favorites on the card since the card opened up for betting weeks ago. You have to really get creative with how you're going to bet this fight. Like even the under at 1.5, it's at minus 345. Like people know it's either going to be on the slight off chance that it's a Derek Lewis knockout, then it's going to be if it's not that, then it's going to be in the first round. And if it's not that, it's going to be Almeida gassing him out and submitting him. I am just scared to go Almeida by submission. I think that's what I'm going to do, even though it's minus 125. The only reason I'm scared of doing that is because there's a world where he just hops on his back and then starts punching him with the side fist on both sides of his skull and knocks out Derek Lewis that way, or more so just TKO where Derek Lewis can't defend himself and then they have to call the fight. That's at plus 160 for Almeida by knockout versus Almeida by sub at minus 125. Do you have? I need to pull up another tab. Do you have inside the distance odds for Almeida?
Yeah, I mean they're also horrible. The fight in general, not to go the distance, is minus 3,000.
Yeah.
So you're never going to touch that.
That's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So I have 2 quick points. I know that we're over time, but it's the main event. If you've made it all the way here, thank you for coming. Obviously, you've enjoyed it enough to be listening to us. I mean, the 2 points. I don't think that you can make Jailton Almeida any bigger of a favorite because there's always going to be that variance with Derek Lewis, where like he could just hit you with anything clean. So to that point, do not anchor your parlays with Almeida, even if it cashes. Like you might look like the smartest guy. I say smartest guy in the world as a minus 500 favorite. It might cash for you, and it might cash for you wildly, where it looks like never a doubt. But that's how this fight will always go until there's a finish. Like Derek Lewis is either going to knock him out, and you're going to be like, holy shit, or Jailton Almeida is going to do the same to Derek Lewis. So whichever way it goes, there's enough variance to keep me away. What I'm going to be betting on this fight, and I'm going to sort of ladder it, is Almeida in round 1 for a unit and a half. And then I'm going to put a half a unit on round 2. Sorry, Almeida in round 1 is minus 110. So basically even money for that. Almeida and then in round 2 for plus 315. I'm going to put a half unit on that. So that'll win me 1 unit back if he wins a round 2 because I would lose round 1. And then I'm going to sprinkle like a quarter unit on Jailton Almeida in round 3 plus 1,600. I don't even know if I should do that. But that at least covers you a little bit if something crazy happens. But more than likely you'll end up winning round 1. You net a unit and a quarter. And there's your Jailton Almeida play without having to put all the money behind him on a minus 500.
I think that's definitely a smart way to do it. And I just want to drive home the point you said before you gave out your play. Books are going to trick you. You look at Almeida inside the distance. I have it pulled up now while you're talking. It's minus 550 on Bovada. When you look at Jailton Almeida money line, it's minus 500. Why would him paired with a result of how he's going to win be priced higher than the money line itself? It's because books are going to trick you. They know that you're going to look straight there and forget the money line. You're like, oh, I'm just going to go and go to the method of victory because that money line's too expensive, and not double check your work. People do that shit all the time. The other thing I'm going to say, and this is the last lecture I have about it, is just Almeida at minus 500 and Bonfim Brothers at minus 500 or more. Some of these guys that are such big favorites, don't even throw them in your parlay. This is 2 grown men being locked into an octagon that are trying to beat the shit out of each other and get a finish. Like, yes, I understand that some are highly more skilled than others, but you are still betting on cage fighting here. And mixed martial arts is a beautiful sport. There have been way crazier things that have happened, way cooler stories that have happened than one of these underdogs winning in the Sao Paulo card. There have been way more crazy shit that has happened than one of these underdogs ruining your parlay. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'm going to ride with your plays there, Rick. I'll let you have those because I am just going to sit this one out, to be honest with you. I'm just going to ride with your play, give you all the credit in the world there because you came up with that. If you want to be really funny, if you've got free play or you want to burn $2 and win and just on the off chance, I've never seen a fight to go the distance at plus 1,100 like that before. There's no way that happens. I think that Derek Lewis gets gassed out, but if you want to throw $2 on it, why not? I'll ride with you, Rick. This has been a fun card. Any parting thoughts before we let everyone go?
Derek Lewis by submission is plus 5,000.
No, see, okay, I like that better. As a funny.
That's fun. Hey, Juliana Payne to submit Nunes. Who says Jalton doesn't get gassed and Derek Lewis just sinks in a rear naked choke for shits and gigs? I'm not putting money on it, but it would be hilarious. It's gonna hit now, and I'm gonna be like, but it's
I'm glad you brought that up because I offered up a funny bet and it honestly was pretty stupid. And now you have a way funnier one of Derek Lewis by submission. So there are some funny ways to bet this.
Yeah, like we afraid to go the distance at plus 1100. I mean, Jalton Almeida to win by points is plus 1600. Like there's no point in doing it either way. You can bet draw, which is still plus 6600, which is stupid because they just don't update the draw odds. Draws will always be plus 6600 no matter the fight, no matter what the total is either, which is stupid. Because if it's a low total, it's never going to go to whatever. Anyways, we're getting on a soapbox here. I want to thank both you guys. It might just be two people listening to this. Whoever it is, whoever listening to this. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, making it this far. We enjoy doing this, and we keep implementing on it to try and bring you guys the best product. So if you got this far, please make sure to like, subscribe, but also add any comments into what we could do better or any additional recommendations that you have for us. Nothing is a complete or finished product here, and we're always continuing to try and make it better and more digestible for you. So glad we could have it. Andy, any finishing remarks here, any promotion?
Yeah, appreciate everyone giving us a listen or giving us a watch. Again, if you're on Spotify or on Apple or wherever you find your podcast, be sure to give us 5 stars if you can. Really appreciates that and helps people show that you enjoyed the show. And if you have any other comments or criticism, please give them to us. We're open to editing the show and changing it how the viewers want to see it. Finally, I'll just say stay tuned for the Sharpen the Public NFL betting podcast that'll be coming out here probably a day or two after this podcast comes out, where we'll be previewing the Week 9 NFL slate. And there will be plenty of football content, college, NFL, as well as a plethora of hockey content coming out this week on happyhoursports.net. I'm Andy. This is Rick. This is Pilsners and Prelims. And appreciate you all giving us a listen today, tonight, whenever you're tuning in. Cheers, everybody.